Haere mai, welcome to the TELedvisor webinar where we are discussing the two AIs, academic integrity and artificial intelligence in higher education assessment. Welcome to our speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Alex Sims. Alex teaches and researches at the intersection of law and technology at the University of Auckland. Over recent years, she has been adapting her assessment methods in relation to digital contexts, and very recently has been facilitating workshops on ChatGPT and assessment with specific relation to academic integrity. Welcome, Alex. Have we shut off the polls? Do we have the results of those?
Just shutting them now and sharing. Thank you, Kay.
So for the first question, what are the links between academic integrity and the recent artificial intelligence apps such as ChatGPT? Which of these are closest to your current thinking? And the number one came in, all apps make academic integrity even more challenging. Alex, you have suggested, I think this goes with a conversation we had earlier, you have suggested that artificial intelligence represents maybe a paradigm shift in assessment practices. Can you unpack that? How do you think our mindsets need to change?
Well, I see it as a paradigm shift because everything that we've been doing virtually has to change. So what people have come through for the education, right from school, you're given a question, you go off and you write it out. Well, now you can go off and you can put something in, and quite often, I mean, we've been doing this, as most of you have, putting old exam questions in, and most of the time it passes, ChatGPT. Not always, but for a lot of it, it does. And so you can get someone who's got absolutely no knowledge of the area and put it in. And so if people don't see that's a problem, then that's the problem in itself. So and when I say a paradigm shift, is like, okay, so it's all changed. So how are we going to combat that? But also, it's also that you could have someone who's used ChatGPT and they produce an answer, but they know the answer is correct, and they use prompts and they've refined it and things like that. So just using the tool itself, I keep on staring, and you would have heard they're cheating. Well, it depends, and so how do we know that you are someone who's just stuck it in and just happened to get a all right answer versus someone who knows the content and has put it in, has done a whole lot of prompts, they know what's right and wrong, and that's sort of the hard bit. But, I mean, if this isn't a paradigm shift, I don't know what is. And I'm quite used to working with paradigm shifts, so I know a paradigm shift when I see it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it certainly is, and it is making us really think about the future of education. I think I heard somebody say, how is the future of education actually going to change, and is this the catalyst to seeing a whole different I don't think anybody even knows what education is going to look like in the future.
Yes, and just on that point, yes, it will change education, but as with a lot of people, I'm just dealing with the academic integrity bit of assessments. Okay, we need to sort of try to get that sorted before we look at the other ones, even though we'll look at the other ones. And also also by way of introduction, at the university level at University of Auckland, I'm one of the academic integrity co-conveners, and I've been doing that for almost a year. So I'm not sort of coming along. I know how academic integrity works, or the processes work, and trying to bring them in, because as most of the people on this Zoom will be aware, if they're not working in it, that academic integrity was already problematic with the move to online. And we at University of Auckland have been struggling basically with the number of issues that have come up, and this is just like lighting gasoline on a lit fire, and so we have to do something. And actually, that's probably one of the questions that will come up later, but I might just pre-do it. Is that it is not a case of, okay, well, we've got these AI detection tools, so therefore we'll use them and we'll catch people. It's not going to work. So that's another reason why this is a paradigm shift, because it's not like turn it in type of thing. Things have to change.
So that sort of does bring us to our second poll question, and that was to respond to ChatGPT and other AI tools, we should, and the number one answer or choice that people have said is radically change our assessments. Sorry, I can't quite read it. Radically change their assessments. And that is one response that we have been hearing a lot of. We need to change our assessments. What are your thoughts on, you know, the whole redesign and what we should actually be doing instead of pen and paper? Do we go back to pen and paper and supervised, invigilated exams?
I've written something on this that's been published today. It's a combination. So it all depends. So and this is what is tricky, because it's not one's solution fits all. Okay, so it really does depend. So for example, we've been running different exam questions, old as in last year through, and some of them ChatGPT can't do. Okay, so it doesn't, at the moment, they'll be okay. Other ones, like someone was telling me this morning, one of the questions that we ran through from last semester was out of 13 marks for a question, ChatGPT got 12.5 of just entering.
Congratulations, ChatGPT.
Yes, I know. So anyway, so definitely that needs a redesign. But also we've got to reconceptualize, and this is the paradigm shift. What do we mean by, questions? And we've done this traditional thing of you give a question and you ask the students to answer it. And one of the easier ways, depending on the subject matter and things, is, which I'm doing actually in one of the courses I'm preparing, is not giving them a question, asking them to answer it. I'm giving them the question and an answer. And then some of that answer is right, some of it's wrong, and getting them to critique it. So explain to me what is correct and why, and what is not correct and why. So something even like that, basic like that, and so that's different really. I mean, some people may have been doing this before, but most of us haven't. And actually, some of the practices that people have already been doing, they can continue because they've been doing very good assessments that students can't get it. And also, I mean, things like the size of the class. So one of the other people at the university who's done it said, oh no, don't worry about ChatGPT, because she knows her students, she works with them, she knows their voice. So when they come and do their final assessment, she knows if they've used it or not. Well, that's wonderful. I mean,
if you're a very experienced teacher.
Well, not just that, it's small groups. I mean, we've got up to 1,500 students in some of our classes. So it's not going to happen. So it all depends, so it's very nuanced. Now, coming back to that point about, in-person, pen and paper exams, I do think there is a role for that. And I've argued that we should be doing that, okay, for a little bit of it. So we cannot, and it would be foolish to require 100% doing that, because exams are really, really, really bad, as we all know, because they are not, they are not good for testing people's capabilities. So fine, if you're very good at writing and you don't get exam nerves and you haven't got dyslexia, and you haven't got all these things, okay, but for the bulk, and it doesn't do anything about presenting. Okay, all those teamwork skills. So it's a very blunt tool, but I do think that we should have an element of most courses like that, so that we can say to our, the people employing our graduates that yes, this person actually does know,
they have learned the content.
Yes, because if I was an employer, I would be seriously worried with some of the graduates that are coming out, because they haven't had any type of secure assessment. Now they'll be said that, oh no, we have had secure assessment. No, you haven't had secure assessment if it's been online. So, okay.
I'm just going to butt in there, Alex, and this thought just popped into my mind, so I don't want to throw you off, but do you think there might be, on the note of the employers not knowing if the graduates actually have learnt the information, they actually start doing like their own exams to get the people employed to just make sure that they have learnt it?
Well, I would be seriously worried if they have to do that, because that means that our degrees are worthless. I mean, they actually do a version of that in America and maybe some other places in the US. Even for law firms, they have and it's not even law, it's just questions that you work through, and they're sort of logic and reasoning questions. And so they're already doing that. But you also need to make sure that people are doing them securely, because people are actually doing it online and feeding it into ChatGPT that can answer it better than a human. But anyway, coming back, even with so you want an element of that, but also you want your assessments that are what I call ChatGPT proof. And that can mean that either the ChatGPT is not, if you use it's not going to let you pass the question, or, and I'm actually going to encourage students to use ChatGPT, because, I mean, it's fine, because they'll be using that in the real world, or I'm already using it. Most of us are already using it for our work. Is doing it so that the prompts, they need to know how to use the prompts, and that's fine. And I haven't, I'm just literally running from one thing to another at the moment for this and other things. So I will design one where to look at the prompts and the quality of the prompts, but that's got to be a smaller class, not a bigger class. But also just on that point, and I have to tone my language down, but the students need to know how to use these tools. Because if they don't, they will be unemployable, because they will be competing against other people that can use these tools. Already they're using them in law firms, they're using them everywhere, but of course ChatGPT it doesn't know that the answers are correct, it's just guessing. And so sometimes it comes out with very well written stuff that's not correct. And so our students will also have the knowledge to know, that's not correct. The issue that we all have, and we all know this, hopefully, is how do we assess that they know it and not? And there are ways of doing it, and it will depend on every single subject and assessment. And this is why it's hard as well, because most people, I'm sure no one on this call, but you all know people like this, they just roll the same things out year after year, and it's easy. And, so this requires them actually to do some cognitive heavy lifting.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So just on that note, this is a bit of a out of the box type of question. Do you think our understanding of AI might need to shift? We're talking about the two AIs, and we need to change our assessment, but I've sort of said, are we looking at a square peg in a round hole situation? And do you see any part where AI is actually going to have to change not just our assessments and our redesign of our assessments?
Yes. I think, and again, I've been involved in academic integrity for a long time now. Yes, it has to, because it just has to change. We can't keep on saying, well, this is it type of thing. No, the times change. And again, it's hard for people, because everything that we've been doing, it's gone. It's like a lot of people have equated ChatGPT and things to a calculator. So back in the day, you had to do it all by hand, and a calculator came along, and you could do that, and that's what you do, and it's difficult. I mean, people will say no, but that is the way it is. I mean, and also why wouldn't you be using the tools? And again, for academics, it's hard because they came up a certain way, and we've done all this, and now you're almost saying it's cheating. Well, that's just life.
For sure, yeah, I agree. I'm just looking at the questions and answers. Please put in your questions for people. Natasha, Alex, I would love to hear more about similarities across paradigm shifts you've experienced and what you think helps making the shift from one paradigm to another.
It's difficult. I mean, because maybe that's just the way my brain works. And it can actually be a curse in some ways, because it's almost like, so I'm actually quite thankful that this is all ChatGPT is all blowing up, because at least I'm not having to say the stuff is coming and all these people going, what are you talking about? You're, mad, crazy and stuff. And it's, if you can see and understand it, that's good. The issue is trying to communicate with other people about the importance. So earlier this year, when people said, oh, for example, I'm commercial law is my main background, and they said, oh, well, ChatGPT's got no relevance because we have problem-based questions. So you give a little fact scenario. And so then I went and got a question and put it in, of course, it answered the question. So another one is they say, oh, well, it hasn't, the answer's not very good. And it's like, well, it passed the question, so it's these paradigm shifts are really, really hard. But as I said before, I think it's easier because there is an awareness that something has to change. So you're not having to go back and try to convince people. I mean, the issue we've got at University of Auckland, I don't know if you've got it in other places, is that no decisions are being made. And so people don't know. And this comes back to the redesign of questions. What do you do? So, if you've got to say an exam question, what that exam question is going to depend on how the exam is run. Is it going to be in person on a PC that you can't get Wi-Fi access? Or is it going to be on pen and paper? Or is it going to be they can be at home? Whatever. So it's really a nightmare situation. So hopefully that hasn't happened in other institutions, but it's a moving feast. I mean, honestly, it's almost like being in quicksand. No one wants to do it. All the different groups are talking within each other, and there's no sort of people coming across. But it's even the mental models. So, for example, I was in a meeting yesterday, some acronym at the university, and we had someone from digital services coming along and saying, well, we've got all these things and all about exams. And then you say, well, hang on, you could also have a test, as part of a secure one. It's either all online or it's all handwriting. Well, no, you've got something like CrowdMarket that can do the both. So there's so much binary thinking rather than, it just depends. And a lot of people don't want that. They want an answer, but there's no one answer here.
It's really forcing us to take a look at the course, the discipline we're in, and think outside the square, and perhaps be brave enough just to give something a go. I suppose we're dealing with the student experience and wanting to make sure they have the best student experience as well, and maintaining everything and the academic integrity. But I suppose it can take a bit of courage sometimes to step out, do something different that you're not used to.
Well, but we have to. That's the thing. We have to do that. We can't it's not a nice to have. We need to do this. But the other thing is, think about the opportunities, and also think about how poor our assessment practices are. Okay, for most people, there'll be exceptions. Okay, so but just talking generality, even me. Okay, so when we mark, we say we're testing knowledge. That's what we say we're doing. But if it's written work, most of that assessment is actually on your ability to write English. So you might have really good knowledge, but you're not very good at expressing it, and you will lose marks. And so
I think I did my whole degree like that, Alex. I got marked down on my inability to write well.
But that should only be a separate component, shouldn't it? And also, I mean, also things die hard. So one of the things I was assessing last year, we've got our capabilities, as most of you will have, or all of you will have. And one of them was, it was meant to be assessing people's presentation skills, for example, a video, and then you would have some other, law and things. And I looked at the marking criteria in the rubric, and even though it said we're assessing you in oral communication, okay, and a bit of disciplinary knowledge, 90% of the marks were on the disciplinary knowledge and 10% was on the oral communication. I mean, so my worry is that if people can't even get their heads around that bit, then I don't quite see how with academic integrity, and AI. And the other thing, just to sort of scare everybody.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I think because it's and some people will be aware of this. So ChatGPT it seems wonderous and amazing, and it sort of can be, and it is, it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm already using it in various ways and making changes, of course. Okay, that's sort of a way of thinking about that is like a calculator, the early calculator. So imagine if you used to doing it all mentally, doing all these things, and someone comes along and pushes it and gives you the answer, and you go, oh my God, wow. Okay, that's ChatGPT, the calculator. Now, already, we've got something like Microsoft Bing. And the equivalent between the two is ChatGPT is like a calculator. Bing, Microsoft's Bing, is like a programmable calculator. So any of you that are in maths or anything like that, that's already the leapfrog that we've got.
And I think you've just answered Oriel's question. Are we at the same point now as maths teachers were when calculators came in? Can't avoid them, so students need to be able to recognise the worth or otherwise of the AI output. So I think you've just
and actually, one of the questions that came up was something about calculators. Said, "Oh, you've got to put the right question. You still got to know how to do it." Well, that's the same with these AI tools. You've got to know how to use them. But another quick thing, and this is coming back to my thing, is what we've got to work out is what is being presented as the students' work. Is that, how do we know that they know that it's correct? So I'll give you a quick example that I've used a few times. One of the presentations I did, we took an old exam question from accounting and we stuck it in, and I have no idea. And it was a calculation, and you had to fill in the things, calculation, and it gave an answer. So I said to everyone, look, I have no idea, is that correct? Okay. And someone said, yes, it's correct. And plus it gave the reasoning as well. And they said the reasoning was too good. Okay, so it's much better than a student could do. Okay. And so in another thing, someone I know, I won't say mention who, a student in another university, he was using it last year, beginning of this year, for his economics. And so he was sticking in the question, this is for university, and it would spit out the answer. And then you'd go, oh, that's not right. He would get it again, and then he would do prompts and change it. And then he would come up with the final question and hand that in. Okay. So what we need to do is to say, how do we work out that it's Alex who has no clue versus this other person who does know it? And that is the difficult bit.
and any ideas on that, Alex?
Well, it depends. I mean, it's always going to depend on your actual thing. So one of the things I said before is what I'm doing is giving them the question and then an answer, and then getting them to critique it. So even if they were using ChatGPT, it might bring up a couple of things, but it's not enough to answer all of it at all. So that's one way about it. But that actual other one, I mean, some people are saying that you could look at the prompts, the quality of the prompts and what they're asking, but we also need to be mindful. And one of the questions or the comments that came up before was about workloads. Okay? We don't want to increase the workloads. And just another quick thing. So as some people have said to me, oh, okay, what we could do then is put the question in and get the AI, whatever, chatbot, whatever, to come up with their answer and then critique that answer. I strongly suggest that you don't do that unless you've got a very, very small class, because every time you feed a question in, it will be a different answer. And so then you're not comparing apples with apples. Some students will have an advantage over other students. So that's why I strongly advise people to give them the answer.
That's a good point. Thanks, Alex. Can I just open it up to the floor? Are there anybody putting your hand up if you have any direct questions? There's no more in the... Oh, I beg your pardon, Andrew. I just needed to scroll down. So Andrea said, are there parts of academic integrity that need changing, not just the assessment as a knee-jerk response? I would posit that plagiarism may need changing in terms of definition and also in the application.
Yeah, it just depends. But there is one thing that just came up that says be specific when it's allowed and when it's not allowed. The thing is, if you say it's not allowed, okay, and then you pick up that someone's using it, if you can prove it, the academic integrity processes at the university cannot keep up with all of this. We've got too many cases. So you're better off designing the question at the beginning so that even if they're using it that it won't help them. And we've also got to be careful about an equity issue. So unless the universities pay for people to have subscriptions to it, it's not particularly fair to do that. And actually, just another quick thing with my academic integrity hat on, I've already explained how, it can help people with writing who, for whatever reason, but also I'm not sure if people are aware, but some of students are being blackmailed because they've been using contract cheaters in the past to get someone else to write their work for them. And then those people have been contacting them later or maybe a year later, and this saying, unless you pay us 10% of your income for the next 3 years, we'll go to your university and tell them that you plagiarized. So it's I mean, I think we're actually helping students not to be blackmailed. So
I would agree with that. I wonder if they're if the students are just so aware of that. I'm a fairly trustworthy person. I just have no idea about the cheating. It would never occur to me. So when you told me about that blackmailing, it kind of shook me. I wouldn't. It would scare the poop out of me to not go down that.
Just on this, someone had a question about do employers want someone that with prompting skills? Well, the thing is that you've got to think, and this is the paradigm shift. Yeah, you think, well, you just but in order to ask prompts to get the question right, you must have knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. Because I don't know if people have been playing with it, but I don't want to play with it too much because I don't want to actually give it a whole lot of information so that it gets too good. But you say, well, no, because I've seen answers, and I go, no, that's not correct. There's, or rewrite it because that bit's not correct. And that's because I've got that knowledge. And again, how do we change our assessments so that we can determine the knowledge piece? And that's really, really difficult. It's not impossible, but again, it just depends on every single subject and course and numbers and all those types of things.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you, Kay. Also, we're at the midpoint of our webinar, and Ben has the most popular question, which was exactly as Alex was addressing then, about trying to collate the ideas on different ways to assess students. We do have a session in a month or so we hope to run where we'll crowdsource some of those ideas, because there are so many valuable suggestions across the whole higher education sector in every country. And what I don't know, I guess my question to Alex, have you in that academic integrity community of practice, have you started to share those across the university, or are people sort of left more individual at the moment?
We're trying to share them as widely as we can, but it's unfortunately it's a little bit hit and miss. So we're sort of relying on the academic integrity, the people to disseminate it through their faculties. So for example, last year I said, look, can I please have a spot in the faculty meeting? This is really, really important because I knew, last year what was coming. And that turned into a bigger thing. And now we're having like what we call a wānanga. It's a workshop to work on this. I've got a meeting tomorrow with my faculty. I've done lots of talks. Information is being distributed around the university, but there's still a lot of misinformation. So we've had people, for example, say, well, you can't do any multi-choice. Well, multi-choice isn't very good, but B, it depends, you can do some multi-choice, it can't do others. Some people think that if any type of figure or calculation means you can't do it when you can. So it's really nuanced and it's hard to get through to some people. But the best way that I found is to get things through to people is actually to show them.
Yes.
In real life. Because when they set spit out, they'll do that. But then actually working with them, because I don't know about everyone else, but I mean, you've all had conversations and people say, oh, well, if we did this, and I always say, have you tried that? You know, that's that. So it's a hands-on type of thing and leading things. And again, the issue is it's just so diverse, because what will work for one thing won't work for another.
Thank you. Yes, I mean this group, TELedvisors group, and friends, we're very much about the hands-on. Tim, could I ask you to unmute, and can you raise that question that you've placed about attribution to the group?
Sure. I think this is just coming from a conversation we were having earlier today, but around ChatGPT's licensing and how it has a requirement to attribute. And we were just talking about, like, how does that change perceptions? I think there's a lot of use of ChatGPT going on, but I don't see a lot of attributions for it and to it. And I guess it ties a little bit into the plagiarism components we're talking about. But the bit that I put in the Q&A is from the ChatGPT documentation around what they suggest an attribution looks like, and it's included in the introduction section of wherever you've used ChatGPT. How would that change our perceptions of what the quality and trustworthiness of the source looks like? Just kind of curious as to what people think. And
if you want to speak, please raise your hand and we can add that for you. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I have had academics say, oh, well, you can't cite it as a formal citation because it's just a tool. But I think that point about making it very prominent, making the reader very aware of the source of the text is really interesting.
I think, Andrew, you're touching on it as well. You're saying, is plagiarism a dated academic concept? Would you like to speak to your question there?
Oh, only briefly. It came up in something else I read the other day. It was just the concept that, or the idea that plagiarism is only present really in academia, and it's invented by academia. Therefore, is it a valid thing? If we're trying to move towards more authentic assessment in the real world, and the real world doesn't have exactly the same concept of plagiarism, does it matter? And then I also looked at the research and to try to determine, is there a link between plagiarism and unethical conduct? And there is and there isn't, depending on the research. It doesn't seem to be a link. So are we trying to teach them something which is not actually a learning outcome, which at the end of the day, they're going to do anyway? They're going to plagiarize in the real world. They're going to copy. But they're also going to do the other things: brainstorm, debate, all the other things we're hoping we're teaching, not just knowledge. So it's just the idea: is plagiarism dated? Is it really something that we're worrying too much about? I guess doesn't need changing.
Yeah, can I push back though? I think plagiarism is still important outside in the real world, because I've seen things where ironies, students have plagiarized somebody else, but then when I've been looking online, I've seen that someone in a blog post plagiarized another blog post. Okay. But that's bad. I mean, if you're in business and you're saying this is my blog and you've been taking material from other people, that is not good. And so I don't think it's just in academia, but also is using ChatGPT, is it actually plagiarism? I mean, you're not using the words or the ideas of one person. I mean, think of that old saying, to copy from one is plagiarism, to steal from many is research. So we've just got something to help us with the research.
Penny, you're on mute.
I was just going to, a hand has gone up and down. So I've missed who that was. Here we are. Kerry, I've allowed you to talk, please.
Hi, I was just going to make the comment that while it's not plagiarism, anytime you represent work as your own that isn't your own is academic dishonesty. So I know some people are kind of jaundiced about this, but I shared a Twitter thread earlier about an instructor that actually involved her students in the discussion. When you ask students, I think, well, you know, sometimes they're not going to respond honestly and directly, but there are other ways to get information out of them. I think a lot of students do understand, and we need to give them credit for that. And I think that when we're framing, you know, when we're happy for them to use AI, when we want them to do some writing, we also need to be clear on what the constructive alignment is of the learning tasks and assessments that we're offering. And also, if we're using writing as a way for them to consolidate their learning, to be clear on that too. One thing this is doing, I think, is shaking up mediocre assessment practice.
Mm. Yeah, I agree totally, because that's what I was saying before, is some people, their assessments are fine already. They don't need to do that at all. I mean, so they don't need to make any changes because they're doing really good assessments.
And I was just thinking about plagiarism being out in the, you know, real world or whatever, but it is part of the academia, and that's the culture of academia. And so it might not be, it may or may not be out in the real world, but it is still the culture in the workplace in academia. And so it is, would be considered still important because that's what it is.
Can I just say very quickly, just to jump in, is that, and I go back to the point that saying they can't use it and try to catch them and then go through a disciplinary thing, it's not going to work. And so we need to be writing questions that ChatGPT can't be used for, but ChatGPT and other tools can be very good at helping people with their language. And so that means if they don't use those tools for these assessments, they'll be at disadvantage. So you might as well let them use it if that logic makes sense.
It does, certainly. To me, I have a background in inclusive education and teaching students with neurodiversity, and yeah, I'll get on my bandwagon, and this isn't what it's about, but yeah, there are tools. These tools can help students to sort of reach that potential that they wouldn't otherwise reach. And there's nothing wrong with them going out into the workplace and holding their own in the workplace and having fantastic careers, but they haven't been able to get through the high school and the university rigor because they don't have the tools available to them.
Hey, I might just call on Pauline. Pauline, you may have some thoughts about assessment, which has been a hot topic in the chat, I can see.
Yes, Penny, thank you. Look, I'm pretty passionate about assessment, and that comes from the time when I was teaching, and I learned that the way to inspire my students was through really good assessment that spoke to them, that connected with their own needs and wants, and they didn't want to cheat. You know, like in 12 years of running a particular program, people didn't cheat because they were so involved in it, and there was this seamless connection between the learning and the assessment. The learning, each week's learning material was connected so seamlessly to the assessment that they wanted to be in class, they wanted to have an opinion, they wanted to be involved in everything we were doing, and we were able to watch the development of their assessments. Now, I know that's my issue, as you will see in the chat earlier, was, you know, when you've got 1,000 in a classroom, that's a different story, and you've got to come up with other ways of doing that. But not every class is 1,000, and we can make some really inspiring changes to assessment where we get students to start using some metacognitive processes on a weekly basis about the way they're learning, what they're learning, rather than just churning out answers in a summative assessment. Thinking about weekly, this is what I'm taking away from this. This is what I'm learning. Using reflection, using blog type activities, getting students to collect evidence along the way as they're learning. Oh my goodness, I could just go on for hours. I'm a bit like before, you know, get me on my soapbox. But I see this as a really exciting time in education, because I think this is going to motivate change, and I'm just so excited about it. So, and lovely hearing everybody's opinions. Thank you. I'm really excited. And that 50% who said we've got to change, go you. Let's do it.
Thank you so much, Pauline, for that passionate response. So if anybody else would like to pose questions or answer topics that have been happening in the chat. I noticed Stafford's made a point in the Q&A about, is it a lack of understanding, I guess is what you're saying, Stafford, about what's actually doing the talking here, you know, the magic box problem with technology. And I know that we have Kane here. Kane, you're also, your focus is also academic integrity within your institution?
Correct, yeah. The way that I think about it, I think part of our problem is that what we're doing when we teach students, we're teaching them to be academics. In many, many cases, obviously there's more or less professional disciplines, but things like, you know, referencing styles and stuff like this, we're teaching them to be academics. We're not necessarily teaching them things that they, A, have any interest in doing, B, will have any need to do in future, and C, therefore, don't see what it matters. So we're tying academic integrity to a set of practices rather than, say, a viewpoint about the world and about honesty and how it can bite you in different ways. Like a few people have mentioned the blackmail thing. I've literally had students across the desk from me crying, turning their laptop to me, what do I do about this? And so when we've kind of turned their minds to other things instead of learning, that becomes our problem. You know, we talk about formative assessment. That's a nonsense we tell ourselves. There is no such thing. Students just see it as assessment. And so we might think that there's learning happening as a result, but it's a byproduct and not the main game. And I think we really need to, when we talk about radical, I mean, challenging the very ideas upon which we base assessment, not just changing assessment. We can't do that for S1 2023 either. So we actually need some start thinking practically. And I think some of the questions and the ways of thinking about the affordances of GPT is important too. Thanks.
And do you think, you've just said about a nonsense we tell ourselves about staff talking to each other, do you think we need to bring students in, or do you have ideas about how that might happen, bringing students into that discussion, into that reframing?
I think generally, as I said, like, hands up if you talk to students often, they will go, basically their focus is on when's my assessments. And that's what they're planning. They're not planning, there's a really interesting sounding lesson in week 5. They're going, I've got 4 assessments that week. And that's the thing they're focusing on. So I don't think bringing them into the room as such, not that I'm seeking to exclude them, but rather I'm not sure what the point of telling them and going, yeah, here's what this means. They'll still see it as a series of assessments.
I guess I was wondering that the very idea, this question of the very idea of what academic integrity is that something that staff own, yeah. You know, like, sorry.
No, I think you're right that students should be involved, but students aren't a homogenous mass either. Someone earlier in the chat, I think Timothy, if I'm not mistaken, kind of said there are students who are not interested in learning and are not capable of learning, and that's true. There are students who are extremely capable and extremely interested and are champions of academic integrity. And there's a kind of spectrum in between. And we need to actually be honest with ourselves about that and have different responses and different ways of engaging with those different levels. But absolutely, we should be talking to students, but we can't be led by the nose either. There are standards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Monsi, you had a question?
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. Apologies, I don't think my video is working, but so look, I have a general question. I mean, a lot of the things that we've been discussing today have been around, obviously, the integrity of the piece of work that is being submitted for assessment. But my question is actually more broadly around volume of learning and what do we see as the risks, particularly for what would previously have been unsupervised tasks. So look, if I can just give a very simple example, imagine you set an assessment to a student to go away and write an essay or a report or whatever is relevant in your particular discipline. And that used to be chosen because it was expected to take students several hours of unsupervised work to, I don't know, undertake research, sequence their ideas or formulate their narrative, write a draft, review, revise, etc. If something that used to take, if a task that used to take 3 to 8 hours, for example, can now be done in less than 15 minutes by prompting and reprompting an AI, where do we stand with regards to volume of learning? So TEXA states that a 1 year of engagement in education corresponds to 1,200 hours. So a 3-year bachelor degree is meant to be an approximate 3,600 hours of accumulated engagement with their study. So I guess what are the broader implications for volume of learning? Can a student, use ChatGPT to get through their entire bachelor's degree in 1/10 the time?
Such a fascinating question, Monsi. And I've also been a bit perplexed by in other forums, people have said, so you set the pass mark a lot higher because this part of the task was so much easier. But what you're saying is, it's actual engagement with the content that you'd really like to know. Thank you for that question. Anyone who's got the mic, feel free to give some thoughts. I must look at the chat too.
I was just going to say, it's just looking at the time. Alex, have you got any sort of last thoughts to send us sort of on our way with, just while we're looking forward to final questions? What are some takeaways?
No, I'm just good to look at the questions and hear everything. I mean, we've all been grappling with these issues, but I do agree with the people saying we need to rethink all of this, and I've thought that for a long time as well. I mean, we keep on trying to everyone we're doing as if they're going to become academics, and they're not. Only point whatever will, and even people that go on to doctorates only very, very low. So it's silly. So this is a good thing to actually, we've got these things, so let's use them, and reimagine and rework. And I think everyone will be the richer for it.
Thank you so much, Alex. We don't have time, I think, probably now to get into one of the final questions in the Q&A, which is what is everyone doing in the research space? But that is a very valuable question. Jenna, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Yeah, sorry. I just had a question, because we've got, obviously, in our university QT, I mean, everyone's putting forward papers and positions, but our research integrity space section have put forward a position, but acknowledging the fact that there are so many tools, AI tools, that are used in research already. It's like, how do we kind of shape this collaborative future, I think, is the big question, considering all the ethical dimensions and what the humans bring, what does the machine bring. Anyway, that was just, I just wondered if there was a similar kind of energy in the research integrity units in other universities about this technology.
Thanks so much. That's right. I'm sorry that by going for the easy match of AI, academic integrity and artificial intelligence, I've obscured that field of research integrity and all the other AI applications that are rushing at us through the screen. Thank you.
Go Penny. I was
you go, Kate.
I was just thinking on your comment, Alex, about it feels like we're in quicksand with everything just changing so quickly all the time. We can't keep up. And I was in another webinar as well where they said exactly the same thing. It's technology is faster than the human response, and there is just no way our policies or making of policies can keep up with the rapid change that's happening. And I was thinking, well, maybe this is part of the paradigm shift and the change and the exciting new phase we're going to see education come into. Maybe we need more guidelines, and I wonder if we as we're the ones that are needing to change to keep up with everything, and we have to change. We actually need to change us somehow. And yeah, we're humans, so, and we don't like change. Anyway, that's a whole different conversation, I think. But Alex, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fabulous conversation around this, and one that's actually just not going to end, and we're going to keep on talking about it and talking about it. And to be honest, I don't know that we'll ever get any, with the fast, rapid pace of change, we might not get any real answers. We might be able to get an answer for now and here, and then next semester we'll be having to change it again. Look forward to the future is about all I can say. Penny.
Thanks very much, Kay, for hosting us, and thank you again, Alex, for that great and far-ranging discussion. Thanks to everybody in the chat. We'll capture those thoughts. Anybody who'd like to pursue perhaps Shiona's question about research, don't hesitate to join us in the team space for TELedvisors. You can go to the Ascolite site to get more information about that. Great to see you all. We'll see you all soon at the next webinar. And again, best wishes to New Zealand from Australia. And thanks to everybody for coming.